But then if you ask questions, then I can kind of figure out the best way to keep gearing the conversation. Because every time I've done this kind of presentation, the questions are always different. There are always a lot of concerns, and I will tell you right now, I'm not here to tell you good news. So just don't be mad at the messenger. I'm just putting it out there up front. And I'm not saying it's not good news for anybody. I hear that there were some state and local governments here. There's nonprofits here. There was no higher ed in the room. It didn't sound like, but it affects everybody as long, as long as you have a business, pretty much. As long as you have employees, it's going to affect you. And and I know it's tough because there are a lot of rules coming down from the Department of Labor in particular, but kind of the federal government in general, whether it's coming from whether it's the EPA stuff that's happening or it's some of the paid leave things that are happening. You guys have minimum wage issues that you're dealing with. So you're just putting all of this on top of that, and I know that there is a lot of stress happening on all of you as the employers, and so don't think that I'm not aware of that. But so this is to try to help make it a little bit easier to at least understand what's going on. So just kind of as the overview, right? So the Department of Labor came out with their overtime rule changes. Those changes go into effect December 1st. And essentially, up until now, you had all of these other things that you had to look at, right? You had the fact that employees had to be paid salary. There was a minimum salary threshold that was at $23,000 and change, and you had to look at the duties test. So the Department of Labor, excuse my snarkiness, they thought they were doing everybody a favor. And by making the salary threshold $47,000 and change, this way you don't even have to worry about the duties test. You know that if you have an employee that makes less than $47,000 annually and change, they will qualify for overtime. So you don't even have to think about the duties test anymore. It's interesting to think about, right? Because it's 100% increase from where it's over 100% increase from where you are now, right? So that's going to affect a lot of your employees, particularly your middle managers. The other thing that is happening with the rule, and this in some ways is actually even more, and that $47,000 threshold, by the way, there's no phase-in, right? As of December 1st, it's $47,000. But the other thing that is actually, in some ways, even more concerning about the rule is that the Department of Labor has also put in an automatic update. So every 3 years, and it is better than what they originally proposed. They had proposed doing it every year. Every 3 years, what they're going to do is they're going to look at a portion of the country. Happens to be this portion of the country right now. And they're going to say, what is the 40th percentile of salaried employees? And that number then becomes the new minimum threshold. So basically, what that means is they're looking, and this is how they came up with the number of $47,000 to begin with. They're looking at the 40th percentile of the southern region, so they're what they've considered the lowest salary region based on the census. But the southern region doesn't just include Florida and Alabama and Mississippi and Louisiana and Georgia. It also, the way it works is it actually goes as far up as Delaware. So you're including DC in there, you're including Richmond in there. Like you're actually including some pretty big cities with some pretty high income to come up with that 40th percentile, okay? So they look at the 40th percentile, but it's also of salaried workers. So think of it this way. What will happen is that you're going to have your $47,000 threshold now. So you're going to take all of those employees, and I suspect, now you don't have to, but I suspect you're going to convert them, most of them, they're under that number, you're going to convert them to hourly, because you're going to have to keep track of whether or not they're working overtime, and you're going to have to pay them time and a half on that. So, wow, the Department of Labor has made it very clear that you don't have to convert them to hourly. are, I mean, I would guess, that you will. So the moment you've converted them to hourly, they're no longer salaried employees. So they're going to be taken out of that 40th percentile calculation. So you've suddenly skewed that number up, right? Because you're only looking at the salaried employees. So World at Work did a study of this, and they made a couple of assumptions. One was this idea of a conversion, right? That people were going to convert most of their employees to hourly. The other was actually they put a cap on the salaried employees at 300,000. So they didn't look at any salaried employees that made over 300,000. And they were saying that by the time the next administration ends, so we're looking, for like 40 or 5 years out, that the salary threshold would actually be $70,000. So obviously the automatic update is a huge concern. So the other things is, are there folks in the room who have employees who work on commissions and bonuses? Okay. So the other thing is when you're calculating your commissions and bonuses, you can only use 10% of the commissions and bonuses to count towards that salary threshold. Yeah. So unless your person actually qualifies as that outside direct sales, which they are exempt, right? If they make any other kinds of salaries or bonuses, or only 10% of that amount can actually count towards the salary threshold. So if they're not meeting the $47,000, counting that 10%, you will also have to pay them overtime. Yeah?
Wait, can you reiterate that?
Yeah.
So what qualifies as exempt? I may have missed it when I was letting someone in, or did you define that?
So there are 7 categories of employees. So teachers, for example, are automatically exempt from overtime. Outside sales are automatically exempt from overtime. There's a very limited kind of group of people who are exempt, but it's not many. And they're delineated by the Department of Labor. And none of that actually changed in the rule. They kept that stuff all the same. They didn't change it. I think the software developers, not your IT folks.
Right.
Don't get confused with that. But like software developers, for example, would be they're in that exempt category too. But for the most part, most employees don't fall in that category. Yeah.
Can you go over the bonus structure again? Because I know that if it's an expectation or a measurable amount, I know that there was something with that.
So no, the way they worked it is if you get a bonus, if you do bonuses or work on commission. I mean, the big part is going to be the commission part more than the bonus part, but it has to be so there's 2 ways that it works. The bonuses and commissions need to be paid on a quarterly basis. So you're going to have to pay them on a quarterly or more frequent basis. And the employer is permitted to make what they're calling a catch-up payment, but no later than that first period of the next quarter. So you get a little bit of delay in it.
But I also understood that if it's an arbitrary, like you had a stellar quarter and you just decide to bonus everybody like a percentage of your over budget or your over expectation. If it's an arbitrary amount, that does not, the way that I understand it, that does not count towards the bonus that would be subject to the 10%.
Right. So you have to be careful with how you. So you have to be careful about how you, if it happens frequently, whatever that means.
If there's an expectation of a certain percentage of your, over LY, I understand that is then subject
Right.
to.
So like for example, let's say I'm not guaranteed a bonus, but I've worked for the chamber for 4 years, and they give me a bonus every year at the end of the year. Then there's an expectation. So it's why you have to be very careful about whose expectation. I mean, are your You know, is it an employer expectation or an employee expectation? Because remember, it's not just, the problem doesn't just come from the Department of Labor coming in and auditing you and saying that they think that you're not, that you have an FLSA violation. It also can come from civil suits from your employees. So if your employee has that expectation of the bonus, then it doesn't matter whether you think it's an expectation. It matters whether or not they think it's an expectation. So it just is one of those things where it gets, it's a very gray area.
What?
Right?
What?
Right, it's a very gray area, so you just have to be very careful about it.
So if you have a performance and bonus pay that's calculated at the end of the year, based on all the form you have, then you're going to have to pay that out quarterly in the following year, right? Because you're calculating at the end of the year. So the year was up, you can't pay it that year, so you're going to have to pay it. You can't pay a lump sum at that point, you got to pay over that year, or can you no longer do that?
So the lawyers are conflicted about how that actually is going to work, to be honest, which is one of the things that we're trying to get some clarity on. There is some thought that actually it's quarterly that year, so you're supposed to know. Yeah, that you're supposed to know beforehand that it's going to happen. That you will essentially have to change your payment structure.
So you're almost having to pay, and then at the end, if everybody misses, there's no payout, you've already paid it out.
No, the only thing that it counts towards your overtime. You can pay a bonus whenever you want.
Yeah.
If you want 10% of your bonus to count towards their overtime pay,
Yes.
then you have to do it on a quarterly basis.
Yes.
If it's not counted towards your overtime pay, you can pay whatever you want.
Right. So if your employee is already making $50,000, then it won't matter because they're already going to be exempt. But if they're making $40,000 and you want $7,000 to count, $7,000 and change to count towards that overtime so that they're exempt, then you have to pay it out quarterly, not the year after. It's sounding like you have to pay it out the year before. So if you were going to give me a bonus, so I will say, for example, I keep hearing from companies that a lot of folks are not going to do a December bonus this year because they will get dinged because they would have had to pay that bonus out quarterly for all of 2016. Does that make sense? Yeah. So it is something, but it's only, but it does come back to the point that it's only if you're using that in your determination of whether or not the employee is going to be overtime. Yeah.
I want to change direction a little bit.
Yes.
I'm a kind of a firm believer that probably some of our salaried people should be salaried to start with. So what are the qualifications to be salaried in the industry or whatever? Some people, not knowing the system, would say, okay, I don't want to pay them overtime, so I don't put them on salary. So what are the qualifications? Do you have to be administrative so much? You have to be in a management position so much? Do you have to do, are there any qualifications for that or not?
No, that was the favor that the Department of Labor did in all of this, was that they said that as long as you make under the 47,000, it's like 47 and then that, as long as you make under that, none of those other things matter. Because it gets too confusing for employers to figure out how much time you spend as a manager, how much time you do as administrative, so this way you don't have to worry about the duties tests at all. The duties tests only matter above that $47,000 threshold.
What if you're a W-2 employee, but you're 100% commission, then you get benefits? Does that fall into the outside sales, or?
So my qualified answer is that I believe so, but it does depend on how you have them set up.
In terms of?
So so I have to look again at what there are other qualifications that make somebody an outside sales person besides just the commission part, so, you know.
Like mileage or?
Yeah, how much time you spend out of the office, like,
And I
there's,
would assume,
yeah.
I'm sorry, and I would assume with that, to Diana's question, we as employers probably really need to look at employee records to see how they're set up in the system, because I may have outside sales set up as clerical administrative,
Yeah.
correct?
And
if
if
you get
you-
audited, then you're.
then you definitely are going to have an overtime problem. So you have to make sure how they're qualified, and yeah, it's looking at how much time they spend in the office versus on the road. There are actual, requirements for being considered outside sales. I just don't remember them off the top of my head. Because admittedly, I am not an FLSA lawyer, so nothing I am saying can be, I should have said that at the beginning, it can't be considered as legal advice. I'm not giving legal advice. Correct, I should have qualified at the beginning, so, yeah.
The duties test. So over 47,000, what is that? What is the duties test?
Yeah, so the duties test does look at whether your responsibilities are mostly managerial or whether or not you're administrative. That's like those are the big things. If you are more administrative, then you qualify for overtime. There are some rules about highly compensated. So basically, once you make over $143,000, then it doesn't matter about your duties test, then you no longer.
So someone could be getting over 47,000, be on salary, and they still qualify for overtime?
If their duties still fall, but those people probably now are already qualifying for overtime because those positions, those duties haven't changed, and the Department of Labor didn't change their duties test. So those people probably, if they fit the correct duties test, they should already be in.
Do you have a list of what those duty sets are?
So I don't, but I can get, I don't know it off the top of my head, but I can get the website to send to Doug so that he can share it, or I can give you my email address.
What would be some off the top of your head?
Well, the managerial versus the administrative stuff, that's a big difference. So if most of your job is administrative, then you still probably qualify for overtime.
Managerial will be like scheduling, hiring,
Yeah,
interviewing.
if you have hire and firepower, and most of what you do is hiring, firing, managing, then you probably do not qualify for overtime. The Department of Labor is concerned, they're very picky about that. It was one of the things that they actually looked at when they were considering doing this rule. They did not make any changes, but they were looking at what California has done. California, for example, said that if you spend 51% of your time doing managerial stuff, then you, for the state, then you qualify for overtime. So they have looked at those sorts of things, which obviously makes it very difficult because if you're stocking shelves one minute and you're, doing hire and fire stuff next, breaking down that barrier, how much time, one day you may do only 40% hire and fire, and one day you may do, 70%. So figuring that out can start to get a little.
Right, and that's a challenge because people have to do more with less. So if you have a higher-end manager, but is that person still doing some administrative duties? So are you saying that a manager's making 60 grand a year, or 70 grand a year, if they're stocking shelves, that we have to calculate their overtime?
If they spend more of their time stocking shelves than they do doing managerial duties, then yes. But that's the case. But that's the case now. That should be the case now, so that hasn't changed.
Yeah.
So if they're spending more of their time doing non-managerial stuff, then they should be getting overtime anyway. The people who are going to be the biggest losers really in this is going to be your assistant managers, because your assistant managers probably, like your head managers, those guys probably do spend most of their time doing managerial stuff, right? But the rank and file person that you've moved up to an assistant manager to get them the experience and stuff they need. I mean, look, those people probably, I don't know about for your business in particular, but they may have a cell phone that you've given them. They may have email that you've given them. Any work that they do on their cell phone, answering any of those emails or anything, even if they're not in the office, still counts as work. So you will have to calculate that in terms of their hours. So, I mean, it's one of those things where those types of things matter. So for an assistant manager who may not actually be spending so clear, they may be under that $47,000 threshold anyway, right? They very likely are. They were probably above $23,000, but they're under the $47,000. They will automatically now, regardless of how much time they spend being a manager, they will automatically be eligible for overtime. So you will have to think about whether or not you're going to continue to give them an iPhone or a device or that sort of thing. Yeah?
So I understand that a lot of the ownership is placed on the employer,
Yes.
right? To classify the employee the right way or make the decision to convert to hourly versus salary, and all of those trickle down ramifications. But at which point does some ownership rely on the employee? Because if they are answering email on the phone or doing something where I'm not around to monitor it, or I mean, how do I know that that's really what happened?
So the difficulty is,
And I say I mean we.
Yeah.
I'm not worried about this over here.
yeah, so the difficulty is that if you have an employee who suddenly one day decides that they're working too much and they're being taken advantage of and they want to file a civil suit against you because you didn't pay them overtime, there is no protection for you. Then you will have so for your own protection.
Everybody listening to this,
Right.
I should not invite our staff here today.
But for your own protection, the employee one day can be fine with the fact that they aren't getting that they are the ones who are responsible. That they don't mind answering an email at 8 o'clock at night, or they don't mind picking up a phone at 8 o'clock at night, or and then the next day they may say, you know what, I've been doing this for too long. I've been doing this for 3 years, and I'm done doing it, and I'm getting taken advantage of. And that's the moment that they can file a civil suit against you and say, well, no, I've got proof. Let me look. I sent all of those emails. Like, I definitely worked more than 40 hours, and you didn't pay me overtime. And all of a sudden, you have to pay back wages at time and a half.
It says it's retro back or once December 1st comes.
No, you have to make the employee whole. So if you are found to actually have a violation, you have to make the employee whole. So you go back and figure out how much overtime. Yeah,
So
right.
what if the employee sends an email to the employer?
For as long as they feel that you weren't paying them overtime, that you should have been.
Is there any protection at all that the employer can do to prevent this? Or any policy?
Track your hours, put everybody on a time card. I mean, honestly, put everybody on a time card, take away their salary.
Then you see a time clock and I'm selling it to everyone.
That's it. I mean, that's the protection, take away. I'm not saying that that's the best thing for your business, but I'm saying that it's travel, right? So if you send your employees away to conferences, you're gonna, if they make less than $47,000 and you're sending them to conference, you have to pay them overtime.
I think some of it can be addressed in an employee handbook, meaning you set forward, okay, these are your expectations. Do not, you are paid up to this point. So anything over that is you're just at your discretion?
No,
Okay.
not for a civil suit.
Okay, and then it's the other point, my other point.
I mean, yes, you should address it, and
Right.
yes, you should. But if they actually want to file a lawsuit against you,
The other important point, I think, here is having the employee, that the employee is real clear in what their job is, because a lot of these owner-operators in here, you might have a manager that you think they should know that they have hiring and firing, but when asked, like in an audit, they're like, so can you hire and fire? Oh, no, he doesn't let me do that. So they need to know that those clear determinations that they can hire and fire.
sure. So especially for your folks who make over that $47,000 threshold, because those folks, I mean, that's part of the managerial responsibility. But If they're making under $47,000, it doesn't matter.
Right.
Yeah, and putting it in the handbook is good. It, gives you, maybe you have somebody from the Department of Labor or a judge looking at it and saying, oh, no, maybe they were trying to do the right thing, but, I mean, obviously I'm coming at it from a slanted view, but my recommendation is that, do you want to leave that to chance? Or do you, where you could end up with having to pay back wages with no time limit going back? I mean, it's.
There's no statute of limitations.
No. Yeah, I mean, some of it'll change, some of it changes a little bit, right, because now we've got it'll be the new reg, so you're, in that sense, right, you're reclassifying everybody, or whoever it is you're gonna be reclassifying now, so, in that sense, you'll have the new starting point of who's eligible, but yeah, no.
Can you speak a little bit about reclassifying, because you have to be very careful how you go about this when you're taking the salary away from them.
So, there are a lot of things, and there are a lot of things that go into this. There are potentially some fiduciary issues if you have 401k plans, and there are some ERISA issues, because you need to make sure that you are, kind of starting from the most complicated part first. You need to make sure that there's not any discrimination happening, particularly age discrimination that's happening, when you're determining whether or not to make somebody salaried or hourly and what the responsibilities are there. I think that is going to be a huge pitfall for a lot of employers. They're going to end up with ERISA discrimination issues. So be very careful about that. As you're classifying, you'll also need to look at your benefits. Do your employees who are, do your exempt employees, most of whom are salaried, I would assume, get different benefits, whether it's healthcare benefits or childcare benefits or vacation time? Do they accrue vacation differently? If they do, and you're moving them to now be non-exempt, whether or not it's hourly or salaried, I mean, it's more in the exempt, non-exempt category, you're going to have to make all those changes. And you are going to have very disgruntled employees when you tell them that you are making those changes. But that's the reality, unfortunately. And unless, of course, you want to have everybody's benefits be the same, unless you don't want to have, unless you decide you can it's cost effective for you to have all of your exempt or not. But you have to do this in a way that you're not looking at so much whether or not somebody is hourly or salaried, but you're looking at whether or not they're exempt or not exempt. All of your exempt employees have to be treated the same way, and all of your non-exempt employees get treated the other way, right? Like, you don't want it to be about whether or not it's hourly or salaried, because whether or not you're hourly or salaried doesn't actually change whether or not you're earning overtime or not earning overtime. You don't have to change anybody to salary. That is a decision, to hourly. That is a decision that you have to make on your own as to whether or not it works for you. But you will have to pay overtime. So the way it works, right, is so you're making $50,000 a year. Or no, that's good. You're making $40,000 a year, because I needed to be under the threshold. $40,000 a year. Currently you're salaried, and you've got, the way you accrue vacation, you've got your cell phone that you have, you've got a chance to go to conferences, you have health care and child care and, some sort of benefits to transportation benefits, however that works. You've decided it's not cost effective for you to bump the salary up for that person to $47,000 a year. So you've decided that you are going to make them non-exempt and they are going to earn overtime. So what you have to decide is whether or not then you want them hourly or not. So at $40,000 a year, they could come in and work 36 hours on week one because, maybe their kid is having a recital or something, and so they want to go to the recital on Friday afternoons. But they'll come in and they finish all their work. And, currently, you're fine with that because they finished all their work and they're going to come back in and maybe they even actually work 44 hours on you then have to pay them time and a half on that $40,000 salary, even if it's kind of making up the 4 hours that they missed from the week before. It doesn't work like that anymore. You still are paying them the $40,000 regardless of how many hours they worked on week 1 and week 2, but because of week 2, then on top of that $47,000, on top of that $40,000, you then have to pay them time and a half overtime.
On the 4 hours.
On those 4 hours. So there is a possibility, for example, and I'm not encouraging you to do this because there are other legal implications if you do this and you could end up into trouble. But I have heard some employers talk about whether or not they are going to actually change people's salary as they're making this conversion. So that they know, for example, that their employee always works 10 hours of overtime. Like it happens, it always happens. So there are some employers who are going to try to lower the hourly rate basically to make up that $10,000 difference. Now, I'm not recommending that because there are other potential legal violations and you're not actually supposed to do that, but
You have a disgruntled employee anyway.
you're going to have a disgruntled employee anyway. Yeah.
Or
So,
disgruntled employer.
And a disgruntled, you're definitely going to have a disgruntled employer. That's for sure.
so this could also affect our FTE numbers and employment numbers, right? Because a lot of employers could also opt just to move a lot of people to part-time and add several part-time employees to fulfill the full-time
So
position.
there is actually an expectation that this is going to
Increase in employment.
increase employment. There's been several studies already that have been done on that, because what will happen is, specifically when you're talking about your assistant managers, if you don't eliminate those positions altogether, you will tell them that they can only work 40 hours a week, and then you will hire somebody to make up that difference. It's actually a very small portion. So it's interesting because it's actually a very small portion of, in the grand scheme, a very small portion of employees who actually earn overtime. But that doesn't change the fact that there are repercussions for having to start making employees eligible for overtime. And there's a big difference between being eligible and actually earning it. So it's only about 13% of employees that actually, well, and then that's not necessarily under the $47,000 threshold. So I just keep that in mind too.
Or that employers are really truly paying overtime when they're supposed to be, because I think until this, we as employers haven't really monitored, and we've done other things to offset that situation.
Yes, yes. And I
Not me, but I'm sure some people in this room.
and look, I mean, let's be honest, right? There are definitely employers, for example, that say, hey, look, I know, I mean, not unlike the example I just gave, I know you're working 36 hours this week and 44 hours next week. I'll just give you an extra day off, or it's busy season, right? I'll just give you an extra day off to make up for the fact that you worked 8 hours of overtime. Technically, you're not supposed to do that, but let's be honest, how many of you in the room do that? Right? That is actually an FLSA violation. And you for sure are not going to be able to do that anymore. Let me talk about the nonprofits, because there's a couple of nonprofit folks in the room. Let me talk quickly about the nonprofits.
We're all going to be.
I might cite the fact that you said that the next time I do this talk, and I'm going up to Seminole County. I might use it right after that. So with the nonprofits, right? There is some confusion about nonprofit eligibility versus whether or not you have to apply. The Department of Labor has been going around talking about the fact that you need a budget of $50,000 or more. If you have a budget of less than, I'm sorry, 500,000, excuse me, 500,000. If you have a budget of less than $500,000, don't worry about it, you're fine. That's also making the assumption that you don't engage in interstate commerce. But interstate commerce is a very tricky thing to define. If you have email, and you get email from anybody who is out of state, if you get donations from anybody who is out of state, or if you get mail from the post office, from anybody who is out of state, ever, any of those